Good morning, everyone. And for those who are watching us from a different time zone or probably on a replay, good afternoon or good evening. And my name is Marilyn. For those who are first time in our platform or watching us or listening to us. I am the founder and CEO of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited or CTS, and we are passionate about helping leaders and organizations who are continuous learners and action takers to transform and thrive in all aspects by co creating customized programs with our world class resources. We have served over 3,000 leaders from over 30 countries in different industries, and that includes Petronas, Sony Mobile, PruLife UK, Ayala Group, Chevron, Tencent, Jollibee Foods Corporation, and Shell, to name a few. And the reason why we are doing this interview and other interventions that we organize is we would like to help leaders who don't know how to stay relevant and adapt to the next normal. And of course, those who find it stressful to lead and ensure performance of a remote or hybrid team. I think that's more appropriate right now. And for those who are afraid that you can keep your team or your business. So to stay relevant and continue to lead effectively, do join us in the interventions and other programs that we do. And today, it's my great pleasure to introduce our leader for today. His name is Anwar Jumabhoy. He's passionate about entrepreneurship. He's a speaker and a published author. He's excited about three disruptions, which are learning, working, and investing. So, without so much further ado, I'd like to bring and invite Anwar. Hi, Anwar.
Hello there. Nice to have you, or nice to see you again, and nice to be on the show.
Yes, and just to share to our audience or listeners today, we've actually get to know each other from lunch club, and we really had an amazing conversation because we resonate a lot in the terms of the messages and the things that we do, and passionate about, right? And I'm so excited that we're now bringing this online so that. I'm not the only person who would learn from you, but more people would be inspired and would learn from you directly, right?
No, great. I mean, Lunch Club was a great experience, and in fact, in talking to you at Lunch Club, I completely forgot. I thought we'd already done this. Hence
Yeah,
my message to you that I thought we already did this, but then I realized that no, we chatted on Lunch Club, but we covered a lot of ground there.
exactly, exactly. And so today we will be focusing around leadership and transformation, and hopefully we can add value to our audience today. And to start with, I actually usually ask 8 questions. The first three is just for us to understand from which perspective you're coming from. The next 3 questions will be, I would say, the meaty or juicy part of the conversation. And the last two would be your chance to answer some Miss Universe questions. So to start with, please do share with us your leadership experiences. If you have like influencers that you'd like to share,
Yeah.
a favorite leadership style, perhaps, feel free to share with us.
I think where I got to today was really a combination of two things. One is working in large companies, and
Mm,
the second is being an entrepreneur.
mhm,
And I realized that working in large companies doesn't prevent you from working entrepreneurially,
mhm, mhm,
with a caveat. So some companies allow that, and some companies don't. And very early in my career, I worked in a shipyard in the UK, which was very, I would say, straitjacket, right? So everybody had to join a union, and everybody had defined roles, and you couldn't cross over, and cetera, et cetera. And there were little groups of people, the electricians, the plumbers, etc. And each group had a representative, and the representative's job was to protect the interests of that group. And then I went to work in Singapore, and I worked in a shipyard, and we all sort of worked together, right? So we had a common aim, which was to survive. And in those days in Singapore, labor costs were going up, And collectively, the management and us engineers, we realized that in order to survive, we need to upskill, we need to work together, we need to do stuff which is more entrepreneurial. And the long and short of it, the shipyard that I worked at in Singapore is still in existence, whereas the shipyard that I worked at in the UK closed down 8 years after I left. And then I went off to be an entrepreneur for a while, and then I came back and worked for a venture fund. And I realized that really we can be entrepreneurial whilst having a job or whilst working for somebody. And our natural form, we are naturally entrepreneurial people, right? It's just that in some companies, they don't want you to be entrepreneurial. And in fact, when I speak to audiences, sometimes I tell them that companies would like to hire robots, but because they can't get robots, they get people like you and me. And then they tell us and they pretend that we're robots, and they try and get us to work like robots. And that doesn't work. I mean, it worked for a long period of time, to be fair. It worked for a long period of time when costs were going up, and the emphasis was on control and discipline and maintaining cost. But we're now in a new era, where the emphasis is really about driving performance, about driving passion, about innovation. And that's the kind of stuff that you lose when you put people into this straitjacket. So that's a long answer to your question.
That's great. At least we know, like, because I believe that you have the shortest introduction I've ever made um,
Okay.
in this interviews that I've been
Yeah.
doing. And it's good to know that, to know, like, your experience, very technical, I would say, in terms of your experience in the corporate world. And but the good thing is that you've highlighted how important it is to um, be a continuous learner, or to learn in order to, like, not only survive perhaps, but to thrive in whatever you do. And also, like, highlighting the part in what you've said, that it's really good, like, despite that you're working with a company or connected with a company, you can have this entrepreneurial skills, or do something towards entrepreneurship. And it's interesting because the recent summit I've attended, they one of the consultants and speaker actually mentioned that it's really good to have, like, a side hustle or a gig, or like in your case, you've mentioned
Yep.
entrepreneurial um, uh, background, or something to do with entrepreneurship as well, because again, that gives you a different perspective, and that might also help you in whatever current role you might have in the organization that you work for, right? So, and it's really valuable, not only for yourself but also for the organization that you work with. And so, understanding the experience that you had in a very technical background, and now entrepreneurial journey of yours,
Hmm.
what is leadership for you?
We live life, and as we live life and we look around us and we see the complications around us, and so you really can answer questions at two levels, right? So you can answer questions, the Buddha way, or the Khalil Gibran way, which is very philosophical and simple, and you're left to interpret it. And if you were to take that approach, then leadership is about inspiring people to do the right thing. But if you were to be more technical, obviously, then leadership is really a whole bag of things that you need to do that vary with time. Sometimes you need to just step back and let people make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, and sometimes you need to direct people. And other times, and particularly in crisis, you just need to focus on directing people. So it's very, I think this whole debate about leadership is just ultimately it's just words, right? Because really what you want is you want that to transfer into or translate into action. And so, as entrepreneurs say, whatever the it takes, that's what we do. And so often, I say don't get too cerebral about these terms. leader, manager, etc. We are all both at different times. And so, and the best example of that is to look at the entrepreneurs and look at the successful entrepreneurs, because they exhibit these type of qualities all the time. um, you know they don't have, you see, one of the problems that you when you work in a company and you become a manager or a leader in a company, you can't pick your team. So you get, put into this position, right? You don't have the flexibility of hiring your own team, and you don't have often the flexibility of setting the vision or the goals of the organization, right? You just get plugged in, right? You get dropped into the place. You contrast that with an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is different, right? Because he set the direction, he hires people who are passionate about the direction. So everybody in an typically in an entrepreneurial company, and certainly you see that in the first early years, 2, 3, 5 years, you
Mhm.
see that everybody is committed because everybody understands, everybody has had a touch point with the founder, everybody shares the passion, everybody shares the vision, and they get things done by rolling up their sleeves, right? So the advantage of that type of organization is everybody is in touch with what they're supposed to do. Unfortunately, sometimes in large companies, managers, leaders, etc., get plonked in, and they don't stop to think about, what's my role in this organization? What can I do to extend the vision? What does the vision of the organization mean to me? How will I exercise it? How will I get passion out of my people? And when I was at Tune Hotel, to give you an example, it's a budget hotel group. Not a lot of people want to work for a budget hotel group when you have a chance of working for a 4 star or 5 star, right? But we hire people who resonate with our passion, our vision, which is, let's help you save money while giving you a great stay. And let's not mix up the fact that in a 4 star or 5 star hotel, whether you use the pool, the gym, the jacuzzi, whether you change your linen 10 times or one time, the cost is spread out evenly to everybody in the room charge. So that's a little bit unfair for somebody who doesn't use the gym. It's a little bit unfair for somebody who doesn't use the pool. Unfair for the person who, only uses one bath towel and not 10 bath towels. And so it's really not a very fair system. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just you have to understand that the pricing is not very fair to individual guests. Whereas in the budget hotel group, you are essentially paying for what you use, and there's no cross sharing of costs. And so when you start to explain this to people, and they say, "Hey, that's a good thing, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the point, right? So why do you want to go to a buffet, eat very little, and pay and subsidize all the people who eat a lot?" So you need to, as a manager, we got our managers to understand why the business makes sense. Then we get our managers to understand that, hey, it's a good place to work because we're doing a good thing. The rooms are smaller, so we use less of the environment. I mean, all this talk about ESG, etc., I mean, that's what we were 10, 12, 15 years ago, right? So I think more work needs to be done by managers and leaders in companies to understand their place in setting and inspiring people. I mean, that's it's a really long answer, but I did a session for a large company not so long ago, and we had the managers, and it suddenly, there's a light bulb moment. And they say, "Yeah, I mean, we never saw our role as one of promoting the vision, and that is part of your role as a leader."
Exactly. And that's really beautiful. I mean, you've shared with us different definitions of leadership. And again, like what you've said, like these are just words, and like I've heard from the past year that I've been doing the interview, like everyone is defining leadership in different ways. But again, what I got from your message is again, it's all about influencing people and directing them to a vision. And it's good to be reminded that it's all about having that passion, living that purpose, knowing that vision, mission that we really like inspire people to get committed on as well, right? and
Correct.
and again, like, it's all about inspiring people to actually have that commitment towards that vision, that purpose. And it resonates not only like with your I would say internal stakeholders or with your team members, but also with the clients that you work with. I mean, there are differences in terms of like the people we serve, right? Like in the budget hotel or 4 star, 5 star. So it's really about defining who do we want to serve and why are we serving them, right? In the first place. So that's really beautiful. And before I ask you the next question, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank William for giving us some love here, and also to invite those who are watching us live, whether you are in LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. Feel free to engage with us, ask additional questions if you have. We will do our best to answer your question, or write down whatever you're learning and getting out of this conversation. So it's an invite to everyone. Feel free to engage with us, to give your comments, to ask your questions. Yeah. Okay. So this is not just a conversation between Anwar and me, but it's more of like having everyone to join this conversation as well. That's why we brought it live
Hmm.
and
No, great,
online.
well said, Marilyn. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that leads me, I mean, we've talked about in my introduction, I've mentioned around new normal and next normal, and you
Yes.
also mentioned like it's a different thing now. Like last time it might have been working and all those stuff in your experience, but now it has changed, and that's the reason why you're very passionate about entrepreneurship, right? So that leads me to my next question. How would you define and describe the next normal?
I, I think there's no such thing as the next normal. We have to, just as in when you start a business, and again, I come back to the analogy of an entrepreneur, right? So an entrepreneur starts a business. He understands what he's going to do. He understands where he's going to go, but he doesn't know the in between. He doesn't know what's going to happen, right? He may go left, he may go right, he may need to hire this, hire that, he may need to change the product, etc. So they view their journey as a journey of continuum,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same in learning, right? You cannot say that I have learned enough, right? So nobody's going to sit there and say, hey, I don't need to learn anything more because hey, video casting, I know everything there is to know, or engineer, I know everything there is to know. There's no such thing, right? So I think that the concept of a new normal is wrong because it assumes that you're going to get to a point of stability and nothing is going to change. Things are changing all the time. It's just that we choose to say that hey, this is the plateau. But really, if you look at it, was it really a plateau? It wasn't, right? So we continue to move, right? We move from offline to online to offline to hybrid. We learn new technologies, we learn new applications. So there is no such thing as the next normal, right? It is going to evolve. What I see now happening, and what everybody sees now happening in the workplace, is that you're evolving away from, and this is, I guess, one distinct shift. You are evolving away from paying for hours to paying for performance or paying for output, right? We have always been brought up with this philosophy since, you know, actually for a period of time, if you look at it, for a period of time in the 1850s and early 1900s, where you were paid for output, number of pieces you produce, number, etc., the piecework, which was, pretty crappy time to live if you were a worker, because your employers, really took advantage of you. But and then after that, we move to pay for hour, right? You come to work at 8, you leave at 5, you come to work at 9, you leave at 6, and we assume that in the period that you were there, you were working, and we're happy as employers to pay for that. Now we come to the conclusion, employers are coming to the conclusion that I honestly don't know whether you're working or not. And why should I keep you there to do X number of transactions or jobs and pay you for hour. Why don't I just pay you per transaction, per job, right? And in the budget hotel business, we did this many years ago, right? We moved away from paying for room cleaning by hour. We pay for room clean per room, right? We moved away for paying for software to per transaction. We moved away from all these, non-definable, fudgeable stuff to hard stuff, right? And that's in a way how a lot of the outsourcing also was born, right? You pay per transaction, per invoice issued, per DO received, etc. So some organizations have managed to make this transition away from hours to output, and the organizations that haven't done that are going to struggle because, I mean, what does it say, right? It says that you really don't know what you get out of your people, and people don't. And on the flip side, for most people, they don't get the satisfaction because, hey, they don't know what they do. They sit there for 8 hours and not entirely sure what they've achieved. So that movement from pay for hour to pay for output is a fundamental one that's happened. I mean, it started with the Grabs, the Ubers, etc. Um, but it's now moved into what I call the office environment. So maybe you start paying for number of calls attended to. Maybe you start paying for the number of duration of total calls attended to. There are lots of ways and accounting firms have also moved towards this. So it's not something that cannot be done. It's just that if you don't make the effort to understand what is the output from your group of people, you will not be able to move. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of large companies, understanding what really is the output for people. And for some people, it's frightening because they come to realize, and that's what happened over the pandemic. A lot of people, a group of people sitting at home realized that, hey, the company continued to move without them, and then suddenly they realize that maybe what they're doing wasn't relevant anymore, wasn't required. And so there's this you know period of change that's happening. It's like moving from the horse carriage to the automobile, right?
Exactly.
There's a
And that's really very interesting, and that's the reason why also not only continuous learning and innovation is very critical in any business or in any person, for that matter, right?
Yep.
Because we are all evolving and times change, things change, and it's very interesting because like my experience is a lot on sales as well.
Okay.
So that's really very performance based or output based, right? Despite that, of course, I work with like some of the biggest brands in the hotel industry before, but of course, on top of the salary, I also get like some commissions or
Sure.
add-on bonuses,
Sure.
right, based on the performance. And
Yep.
I like it because at least I have the opportunity to like earn more, right?
And
Which is
this is going to be the challenge, right, Marilyn? There are going to be some people who want to hide away and want to get paid for not doing very much. And in an organization, you need some of, I mean, you will need some of those people, but they need to understand that, okay, in that case, we're happy to keep you, we're happy to have you, and we see your role, but then don't get upset when other people get paid more, right?
true.
And that's what entrepreneurial organizations also do well, which is they're very open with their compensation system.
Right, right.
And
And that's what makes it more exciting in these times where, a lot of things are evolving, a lot of I would say fast-paced things, and a lot of movements, innovation, and even structures that are coming out that we don't normally get to hear about in the past, right? So it's very exciting, right? Exciting times.
yeah, and Marilyn, one of the problems for HR practitioners is that labor laws and employment acts, they always lag, and so they had a role, they had a purpose to protect labor, but now a lot of these rules and regulations are actually constraining companies from making the change. Again, I give an example from Tune Hotel, right? we wanted to restructure the way that we work. We talked to the managers. The managers are quite happy. We were going to move to a 5 day week, instead of a 5.5, 6 day week, which I thought was wonderful because, people deserve to get at least 2 days off a week. But that meant that they had to work slightly more hours in the 5 days that they were working.
Mhm.
And again, in organization, you go against HR, and HR says, Anwar, you can't do this. And I'm like, but why? No, no, the Employment Act says this, and the rule says this. And I said, but the managers are okay with it. No, but then you have to re-sign employment contracts. And HR people are wonderful, but many many times they just get in the way. And sometimes you can't blame them, like Marin, because they look at the regulations and they read it to the letter, and they try and comply to the letter of the regulation,
Exactly.
and it doesn't make sense, right? So the newer companies are able to get around this because as they hire people, they make it clear, right? And it's the same in the Asia group, right? You work slightly longer hours, you don't get the full benefit of overtime,
Mhm.
but you get 2 days off. Wouldn't you want to trade that? I would.
Yeah, true, true. Because we need to have that balance as well. But at the same time, there's a lot of compliance to be considered. And again, that's, I guess, the reason why we have HRBPs, or what we call the modern HR. I remember that conversation with Dave Ulrich
That's
recently,
right.
right?
That's right.
He's the father of the modern HR, and that's where, like, like what you've said, outsourcing, shared services, HRBP came along. And
Correct.
because again, the traditional structures before are no longer working, based on the current condition and the changes that are happening so fast, around the globe. So it's about, I would say that, it's really a balance between, like the operations that you have, compliance, as well as like what actually works for our operations and, for our people, right?
And
And
Marilyn, it's about recruiting, right? So if you are going to have such a rigid organization, how are you going to be able to recruit people? I mean, not so long ago, I went to visit one of the companies, and there's a whole bunch of people in the office working quite late, and I sort of asked the HR person. I said, "What on earth is everybody doing at this time of the day?" And they said, "Oh, they're processing resumes." I'm like, why don't you just use the technology and put a technology in place, and it'll just do it for you, without having to have all these people? And they said, oh, but also we have a challenge because our organization, we work 5.5 days a week. And I'm like, and we can't recruit enough people. And like, things are okay. So what do you want to do? You want to recruit people, or do you want to work 5.5 days a week? I mean, no, they want to work 5.5 days. Well, I said, then that's tough, right? You're looking for people who are willing to work 5.5 days a week, and those people have the option. I mean, it's like when you go shopping, right? Do you want to be overcharged? Do you want to take, I mean, you have a choice between an economy seat and a premium business seat. Who would choose an economy seat? You wouldn't, right? And yet there are organizations who say we can't find people. We know we're only offering them the economy seat, and it will cost us nothing to offer them the premium seat, but we don't want to do that. I mean, go figure, right?
exactly. That's like what makes it more confusing for some organizations, or,
That's right.
for some rules, that needs to be more flexible. I mean, the trend word now is really adaptability, agility. Like we have to move on.
Correct.
So yeah. So before I ask you again the next question, I'd like to say hi to Sophia and thank you for giving us love. And again, I would like to invite everyone to join us in this conversation. Ask your question, give your comments, and what you're learning from this conversation. So whether it's on a replay or especially this live, because at least we can answer you live as well. So, I would like to ask from you, like, you have an experience as a corporate leader, and now you're working with corporate leaders as well as an entrepreneur. What would you say would be the top three problems that they normally face?
The the number one problem that I keep hearing is around recruiting the right people,
Mhm.
and that's the number one problem that I hear. One is recruiting the right people. Two is motivating them. I think these are the top two. The rest really don't count. So
Mhm.
recruiting and motivating, and unfortunately, a lot of leaders are still using old paradigms, right?
Mhm.
We do a review once a year. We don't give you feedback. We have this probation period. I mean, these things didn't work, but you still pursue them, and then you complain you can't get people and you can't motivate people. So one is they need to rethink about recruitment, how they recruit, and how their policies are in terms of getting people on board, onboarding them. So the whole area on recruitment, I think, is an issue for a lot of companies. And the second is motivating and influencing them, and that comes back to the earlier point, Marilyn, that we talked about. The role of the manager is to find that passion in their people. And if you don't understand your vision, you don't understand where you're going, you don't understand your trajectory of the organization, you won't be able to inspire your people. And so these are really the two challenges.
Wow, that's great, and thank you for summarizing that. I mean, I think it's been really common that I hear a lot um, around people recruiting, motivating them, or even retaining these people. And again, it boils down to like the culture of the company, the mission, the vision, and having that common ground in terms of probably the core values that
Yes.
the people that you recruit in your organization as well, right?
Yeah,
Because it's
and
in
Marilyn,
alignment
yeah,
with that.
exactly. Marilyn, sorry to sort of butt in, but and a lot of these large companies think by putting pool tables and bean bags, that doesn't work. The pool tables and bean bags are for people who have the right mindset. And if you're not able to recruit and change the rules and regulations of your organization, you won't get the people who enjoy the bean bags and the pool tables.
Very true, very true. I mean, it's all about finding the right fit in your organization and also building that culture. And again, it's not an overnight thing. I know it takes time to do so, but if you like set it right from the start and you actually are focused on moving towards that in terms of recruiting the right people, having clarity, like what you've said, in terms of the purpose, the vision, the mission, and what are we committing in the values of that you want to see within your organization in order to build that culture as well, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, and so we won't leave them with these two problems, of course. um, so what do you believe will be the important leadership capabilities or skills you must have? I know that you said that next normal is really like not not something that you believe in, but in probably I would say that in the future, what will you say would be, or even right now, what would you say would be the important leadership capabilities and skills that leaders must have to continue to lead effectively?
It comes back to the two problems, right? So the first thing is on recruitment, retention, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to dismantle a lot of the processes that you currently use and rely on. So you can't, you can't continue to recruit the way that you're recruiting, and you can't continue to run the organization the way that you're running it. And you need to think more about more flexibility, about more how entrepreneurs would recruit. And we talked about one of the changes, which is in the workplace. I don't think you need to recruit for academic qualifications. I think you need to build a flexible system that you're able to recruit based on capability. you know are your managers able to recruit based on capability and identification with the organization? I mean, so when I recruit at Tune Hotel, I'm looking for people who believe what we're doing is right and believe what we're doing is good. So you need to start to recruit people differently, and then you need to manage them differently, and that hopefully will solve the first problem, which is on the recruitment side. And then on the motivation side, I mean, really need to think, why do you exist? Why should I work for you? Right? You need to be able to answer that question, and it has to be more than just money. So I work for you. Why? You need to be able to answer that question. What's your reason for being here, besides making money and returning money to shareholders? So this is the challenge really for leadership.
That's really spot on, right? Especially around recruitment and motivating them or retaining your team. It's all about really that flexibility and looking into the capability rather than the again the academic, as you mentioned, and like doing things differently. I think that's how. Um, if I were to define next normal, that
Yes.
would
Yeah.
be that will be having that flexibility and like continuously evolving as well. Yeah, and again, like what you've said, answering this question, why are you working with this organization, starting with your why, right, Simon Sinek?
Yep. Exactly. And Marilyn, I asked the viewers and the guests watching this, how many times in your organization, you personally as an individual, Marilyn, have you been asked to do something that made no sense? Has it happened to you? Why has it happened to
Definitely.
you?
And I
Why is
couldn't.
yeah? And why is it you can't tell your boss that, or why doesn't your boss not listen when you tell him that this makes no sense?
Exactly, and I'm the type of person who's very like I'm really straightforward in terms of my communications as well. So like I remember this instance where the boss actually briefed us around promotions, and then I asked her a very valid question. I would say I asked her like, what's the validity of the promotions? And after that briefing, she asked me to go to her office to ask me why am I questioning her. Like, is that something wrong, right? I mean, the question
Exactly.
is very valid considering we're talking about promotions, right? So, it's really about like again being having that psychological safety as well within the organization, and really asking like what are valid questions and not being too personal about anything, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
eh,
Marilyn, that's one of the points that was picked up, in that very famous book by the Google. Oh dear, this is Laszlo Block, I think. Bock, right? When he talk out, and that psychological safety that you have with a manager is
mhm,
is an important part of allowing people to perform. Because
yes,
if you because you know it's like saying that if you take a weightlifter or you take a high jumper and you put a bar there, and if in his mind he's going to only attempt a height that he knows he can make, you're not going to push the performance, right? He has to
exactly,
attempt heights that he can't make. He has to carry weights that he can't lift. He has to run distances that he can't run. And he's more than likely not to succeed on the first attempt. But if you make the environment such that the penalty, the embarrassment is going to be so high of not succeeding, then why should he try to do better? And it's the same in an organization, right? If I'm
yes,
achieving to jump higher, run faster, run, you know, run quicker, hey, if I'm going to get in trouble that every time it doesn't work out, I'm not going to stretch myself and I'm
exactly.
going to hide for cover.
That actually reminds me of a question I like one of my connections posted. I think that's Fraser Morrison around sales mainly. Like and he was posting whose responsibility is this or who should be in charge in this, right? But like I said, it's everyone's responsibility to make the experience of the customers delightful
Yep.
throughout. So in every touch point, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that the customer will be happy, right? It doesn't matter whether you're at the back of the house, or in front of the house, right? Because everyone has, like what you've said, each and everyone has a role in the organization, whether you are like directly in contact with the customers or not. You have
Correct.
not only a responsibility but also like a contribution in making that a delightful experience for your customers, right? So I said that's, although of course in most cases like sales will be like the first touch point and like responsible around that, but again I said it's everyone's responsibility, and like understanding what your role is in the organization, what you like you've also mentioned. And before I proceed to the next question, I'd like to share this very interesting question from Mendy Nasan. How about cross cultural issues? Can it be the problem that we face in the community where we have people from diverse backgrounds?
I think it's something that always to be sensitive about, right? So, um, there are certain, what I would say, face-saving things that become more important in Asia than in Europe, right? So I remember we had a new CFO who came in from the UK, and at a meeting once he put his feet on the table and was rocking, and I said to him, I said, John, that's not something that we do here. We just don't do this kind of thing in here, right? So sometimes um, you get people who do things that can be considered to be offensive. But
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, I think fundamentally we are all people. We all have the same desires. Whether you're um, white, gray, green, black, red, whatever language that you speak, we all want to be, treated with respect. We all
Exactly.
want to have jobs that are meaningful,
Mm-hmm.
and that's common everywhere. So I think whilst there's lots of training on cross cultural stuff, and perhaps in the 80s and 90s that was possibly more relevant because there was less cross cultural teams. But today, you know offline, online, you know uh, teams mix. I think that cross cultural thing is not so critical. What I would say though is that the ability of some communities to have meaningful hard questions is something that's still missing, right? So I wouldn't say it's a cultural thing, or maybe it is a cultural thing, I don't know. But in an organization, if you are able to get the opportunity to separate the emotion and the person from the issue,
True.
you obviously can do far better than, because people tend to get wrapped into, I don't like him, or I don't like the way he said it, or I don't like. But okay, put that aside. Let's deal with what was said. Does that make sense or not? So in your, Marilyn, in your instance, in your example, when the boss called you, maybe she was offended by the way you said it, or maybe she, rather than taking the question as what it is. I mean, it's just a valid question. Forget about my role, my position, your role, your position, your ego. It's a valid question, and we do tend to, it's our defense mechanism to jump to this ego or jump to this hierarchy, and not many organizations achieve this. Let's separate the emotion from the fact.
Yes. And I think that's also like what we would call I guess it's not really much of a control, but really responding more rather than reacting. Like what you've said, separating emotions to like what's really valid at that moment, right?
Yes.
And it's actually, I would say, Wendy, that um, a it could be like cross cultural issues, having a diverse, because we all have our different perspectives, different habits, um, different experiences that we have, which we give meaning to.
Yep.
And I would say that's also an opportunity for us. And we've been hearing a lot around diversity and inclusion nowadays, right? As well, because like nowadays, we can work global easily, especially in the hybrid setting. And again, that's also like an opportunity for us to leverage on the strengths rather than thinking of like what could be the problem to this. It's more of like how can we actually leverage on each other's strength and create more joy within the organization. Having this diverse background, having this different perspective, because it really helps, especially when you're innovating or when you're
Yes,
doing some exercise like design thinking or coming up with new ideas and innovating some products. It's gonna be helpful because
definitely.
people are coming from different perspective. People are very diverse, so they have like, oh, this my experience is like this, and
Yep.
while the
So
other one.
Marilyn, they have different, they have different needs to be satisfied, right? So with some people, this is important to them, and other people, other things are important to them, and that's the secret of customer service, right? That's the secret of product development, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the famous story of which Malcolm Gladwell talked about in tomato sauce, right? I mean spaghetti sauce, right? You make one type, or you keep trying to find the best one, or you make 100 to satisfy 100 different palates. And these are the issues, right? So when you get a diverse team, that's the kind of stuff that you can start to produce.
And it boils down also on the, you've also mentioned this, in that principle that of everyone wants to be respected. Actually, if I may add, the language of male is actually respect, but the language of female is love. So everyone needs to be loved and respected, like, not only having these rules but also having this flexibility and respecting that differences in perspective, um, in the color, in the beliefs, right? But at the same time, with that respect, we have to be ensuring everyone that everyone is welcome to give their ideas
So
open.
Marilyn, can you have love and respect? Can you have one without the other, or does one come first?
um I wouldn't say that it, I would say it's principle. It has to be both present, whether it's a personal or a professional environment, right?
Okay.
Because love is not, the mutual or like a husband and wife or a child and and parent thing. It's not limited to that. And it's very interesting because I read this profile of mine which is focused around love and compassion. That's the energy I exude for some reasons, according to
Okay.
my Akashic report. So
Yeah.
but it's very interesting. I said, like, how can you actually do that? But it's very interesting when I've organized this summit, and Dahlia Feldheim actually talk about compassion at the workplace. It's not really about it. It's really about caring and being more coming from that perspective of love. And again, that has to come hand in hand, I would say. Like
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
both
Yeah.
love and respect within, within the people that you work with or deal with, right? I think these are, I would say, very basic that
Yeah.
you should
Yeah.
have, no matter what the race is, no matter what the gender is, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And no matter how small or big your organization is as well. So
Yeah, I had
anyway.
very early, Marilyn, very early in my career, I had a boss who was from Taiwan, and he never used to forget anything. And I told him once, I said, I don't understand. How is it that you just don't forget anything? And he said, because I love everything I do.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I'm really appreciative of like my clients, my partners, and the people that I have conversation with, that they see that in me, the passion, the love with the things that I do, like even this interview and the, like, the webinar summits that we organize. And I said, like, okay, so it's possible. So you can possibly, like, show love in all the things that you do, right? So okay. So
Yes.
yeah. And that, I'd like to ask you then now, we've been talking about learning, we've been talking about leadership. And what do you believe is the role of learning, leadership, and transformation in order to thrive um, in the next normal?
That's Marilyn. That's too broad a question. I think that let's not. So the first thing is, let's not talk about a new normal or the next normal. Let's talk about a
Mhm.
progression, right?
Yes.
So we are
Mhm.
going to look at a progression, like a development pattern, right? So we as we as we grow older, we learn new skills, etc. So I think it's important to continue to acquire skills, and that acquisition of skill helps you open new opportunities. So learning is really about acquiring new skills and being open. So different organizations have different directions, right? Some are saying that this is the only thing that we want to do, and we want to only hire people to do this.
Mhm.
And other organizations are saying, let's take a stock of our skills, let's take a stock of our competencies, and see what else we can do. And so really, the role of the leader in those two different environments is different. So the role of the leader in an environment where he needs to take stock of what he's doing, who his customer is, and then evolving that into doing better is different to a leader who is a position that is, no, this is a prison, we only handle inmates, and this is how we handle inmates, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that again, like, goes back to your point earlier around recruitment, like having more flexibility and really, like, I would say not only hiring based on the capability, but also on the attitude of the person, right?
Yes, of course.
Because that
That's important.
that's important, and I guess the very first that you have to consider rather than the academics and all those stuff, because
Yep.
I mean skills can always be can be honed, right? So
And
and
this, the corollary, the consequence of that is that rather than put all your effort into finding the right candidate
Mhm.
and putting all these, you know, um, probationary stuff, etc., into it,
Mhm.
maybe you should have more flexibility there and put all your effort into getting the wrong people to leave. And that's what a lot of large organizations are unable to do. They're unable to get the wrong people to leave because all their effort was on recruiting, and they thought they'd never make a mistake in recruiting, so they don't have to worry about the other side of it. And what I say to them is, put less effort there and put more effort on here, because you just don't know how to get people to leave.
True, true. That's very interesting concept, and like people must be reminded of of that as well. So yeah, so that leads me to my next question. This is more open than the previous question. Just a
I
warning.
hope there are not too many questions.
I have last two questions for
Oh,
you.
okay,
These
okay.
are this
That's good.
last two question, I would say, is the most open questions that
All
I
right, all
would
right.
have among the eight. So, if you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it?
Oh, how interesting, right? So, if I have a magic wand and I could use it, I would get rid of all the rules, regulations, and SOPs that make no sense,
Get
because we
rid
have too
of
many of
the
those.
rules and SOPs that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we have too many of those, and organization they're just holding organizations back. They're like a ball and chain, which is unnecessary.
Yeah, very true. I mean, nothing wrong with having rules and regulations, SOP. That's really a great way for us to start, especially for new hires and all those stuff, right? But again, like what you've said specifically, those SOPs that does not make sense or are like again not valid in the operations or in the world today, in the type of evolving environment that we are in, right? so
Very
that
true.
so that leads me to my last question, which is if you were to ask yourself a question that you can best answer, what would it be? And since you
Oh,
can best answer it, please do answer it for us.
Oh, that's a really, really interesting question, Marilyn. Um, I would say that one of the questions that's important to organizations and people is how do you build this flexibility? How do you build this creativity in your people? And when do you start? And the answer to that question is get people experimenting as early as you can. If you have kids, then let them just keep trying different things. I mean, recently I saw a post by Anthony Tan,
Mhm.
co-founder of Grab, who said that he takes his 6-year-old and 3-year-old into meetings occasionally with him. And his 6-year-old was, it was a Mother's Day post, and his 6-year-old was there with with his mother, Anthony's wife, and taking notes at a meeting. So I think exposure and if you can get as much exposure and experimentation with your kids, with your people, you will reap benefits.
E- Exactly. And a lot of organizations are already doing that, especially the big ones. Like I've heard Google has been practicing it. And even I do that a lot. I experiment a lot in what I do. Like I said, I think of a question and I'm always curious of a lot of things and I would experiment because usually I would hear like how the challenge for most HR practitioners or L&D for that matter, how can you actually bridge between knowledge and implementation or application, which is still like I would say
So,
a lot of a question or a problem to most organizations. So I experimented a lot on that, around that and why. So I've been observing every time we were running programs and why. That's also the reason why I like in my introduction I've made mention around co-creation and customization of programs because
mhm,
it just makes sense. And recently the experiments that I've done is really around gamification because I've
okay,
seen how people can actually apply what they're learning or apply it and then let's reflect on what have we done.
sure.
So that combination I would say is like an integration of like what's really knowledge and
Hmm.
how do we apply it and how do we want to see that in our workplace,
Hmm.
right? Because I think that's always like something that misses out in most programs or interventions that I see, right? So and again it's always like um what can we do after this program, because you need to have that follow through. And without that follow through nothing will really be applied.
That's right. That's right.
So that's the reason why I'm really like campaigning or I've been really like encouraging as much leaders and HR practitioners that I have access with to like come see this, experience this, so that you would know how you can benefit or make use of that, whether hiring us or you use that on your own.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for that question. Very interesting question. I'm not sure if I shared it. So how do you build flexibility and creativity in your organization? And again, it starts with also like with your own family, right? And it's really exciting for me because I have three children of different ages,
Okay.
and um and because I like to experiment a lot and observe a lot, I always do that with them as well.
Yeah. No. I mean, it is. It is. You know, it's nice to have young kids at this age because we are also mentally are more more
Mhm,
accepting of
mhm,
experimentation, right?
mhm. Yes,
So we give that flexibility to the young ones to paint the way they want. They don't have to paint the things you want to paint. I mean, draw the way they want, eat the foods they want. So it's nice to have young kids, and I have two grandchildren at this age where the parents are happy to get them to experiment, and we're as older people looking and thinking, okay, does this make sense? But it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
exactly. And that's how you encourage creativity after all, right?
Correct.
Being able to
Correct.
experiment and try out on new things.
Correct.
So yeah. So before we end this interview, do you have any additional message or invitation to our viewers or to our
Yeah.
listeners?
Marilyn, it's just been great having to this ability to speak with you and to try and spread the message that you don't have to start a business to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are not different people; they just do things differently, and we can all choose to do things differently. And if anybody would like to connect with me and book a short session to talk about their issue, just ping me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to do that.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I will be tagging you on LinkedIn if I haven't done so with this interview, but I will do that. Thank you so much, Anwar, for your time and for this very insightful conversation. I would say it's very straightforward and like a lot of very entrepreneurship idea that you have shared with us and opened up
Sure.
most of our audience with. So thank you so much, and for those who watch us live, thank you so much. And I really appreciate Mendy's question. It's very interesting and kind of difficult as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. My life is difficult, right?
So thank you so much, and do join us in this journey again to create opportunities in having this conversation and interventions, and hopefully we can create a better world to live in, right? So remember that even the richest investors in the world would say that investing in yourself is the best investment you can ever make in your life. So with that, we would like to leave you with this quote that if your action creates a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Thank you so much, Anwar, and thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone,
Great.
for watching us. We hope that you get inspired and motivated with this session today, and looking forward to see you next week. Bye for now and stay safe.
Thanks, Marilyn.